There was a time they mistook your silence for solitude, your detachment for exposure. They thought you were walking alone, fragile in your conviction, unsure in your stillness. They were wrong. You were never unprotected. You were hidden, shielded not by noise, not by declarations, but by something far more unsettling. A force that didn't need to speak to be known. And now, the secret's revealed. The truth clawed its way to the surface, and the ones who mocked you are looking over their shoulders. Not because you threatened them, but because they finally realized you were never alone, and who's protecting you now? That terrifies them, because power unspoken is power untouchable. Earth. They always assumed your backbone was borrowed, that you leaned on people, ideas, or attention to keep you from folding. They never understood that your stillness was built in shadows, in rooms where you screamed only inward, where no one came but something still stood behind you. You weren't coddled, you were covered, and the energy guarding you now, it doesn't blink, it doesn't reason, it doesn't operate on forgiveness or justice. It's older, colder, smarter. It's the part of the universe that watches predators smile and says, try it. It's ancestral, it's spiritual, it's psychological protection in a world of emotional warfare. And they feel it now. It walks into rooms with you, doesn't announce itself, but clears space just by being. They thought they could provoke you back into their arena, that one more jab, one more rumor, one more orchestrated betrayal would get you to fold in on yourself. But when you didn't react, when you simply observed with that knowing stillness, they started to unravel. Because people who operate in manipulation rely on pattern. They're not spontaneous, they're mathematical. And your unpredictability is a virus to their system. They planned for the old version of you, the one who explained too much, forgave too easily, stayed too long. But they didn't plan for the version that came back watched over. The version of you who now feels protected, not by others, but by something they can't name. Psychologically, the human brain is wired to fear what it doesn't understand, and you've become unfamiliar, alien, not because you changed randomly, but because you evolved in the dark, outside their influence, beyond their reach. You didn't come back angry, you came back unreadable. And that's far worse, because anger can be weaponized. Silence, on the other hand, when backed by power, that creates paranoia. They don't know who taught you what you now know. They don't know how you keep walking like you know their next move. But you do, not because you're magical, but because you've stopped questioning what your soul whispers. They want to know who's behind you, who's feeding your clarity, who's holding your hand while you walk past their chaos without flinching. But they'll never find them, because this protector of yours, it's not a person, it's your alignment. Your healed mind, your war-forged spirit. You've made peace with your darkness. You've let go of your need to be understood. And in doing so, you've become the kind of individual who doesn't get saved. They get back. And when someone is backed by something larger than ego, larger than status, larger than narrative, they become dangerous. Not loud, not violent, just impossible to manipulate. They gossip now with a tremble. They mention your name with disclaimers. They've changed. They're different. But what they really mean is, they've become immune. And immunity is a terrifying thing for people who rely on psychological viruses. You're no longer infectable, no longer confused, no longer cracked at the foundation. You're built different now, reinforced by something not everyone gets access to. Not belief, not theory, but experience. You've walked through fires that incinerate pretenders. You've stared down truths that shatter the shallow. And you came back standing, silent, steady, surrounded. Now the rooms they once dominated feel colder when you enter. Not because you're doing anything, but because you don't have to. You don't chase power. You carry it. And what protects you now doesn't flex, it watches, waits, responds only when provoked. That unnerves them. They used to think they knew your limits. They tested them often. Now they realize your limits were never boundaries. They were choices. And now that you've revoked access, they wonder what else you've reclaimed. Your mind, your energy, your lineage, your timing, your protection. You no longer look over your shoulder. That's how they knew something changed. You don't walk like someone hoping things don't fall apart. You walk like someone who knows that even if they do, you won't. You're supported now by things that don't shake. And the ones who built their confidence on your confusion, they can feel that in their bones. They sense it in the shift, the way the room honors your presence, even in your quiet. You didn't have to scream to become a force. You just had to stop explaining to people committed to misunderstanding you. They buried it deep, beneath layers of sweet distortion, beneath half-truths wrapped in performance, beneath carefully constructed versions of you that served their narrative better than the reality ever could. They thought truth could suffocate under shame, that if they lied loud enough, often enough, the world would forget what actually happened. But truth does not die in silence. It grows teeth, it learns patience. It waits in corners until the mask slips, until the game overextends, until the ones who orchestrated the illusion get comfortable enough to forget they were never that convincing to begin with. And then, it moves. The truth clawed its way to the surface, not because you forced it, but because falsehoods rot from the inside. They mistook your stillness for surrender. What they didn't realize was that silence is how truth sharpens its claws. You watched them scramble to maintain the lie, watched them build scaffolding around their stories, propped up by cheap alliances and whispered rumors. They worked hard to make your name taste bitter on other people's tongues. Because truth alone wasn't dangerous, it was dangerous in your hands. And so they tried to disarm you with noise, with accusation, with dismissal, with fake concern, anything to distract others from asking the real question. Why were they so desperate to control the story? You didn't rush to correct them. That's what they couldn't process. You didn't try to fight fire with fire. You let their blaze consume their reputation because you knew the truth didn't need rescue. It needed time. The beauty of the truth is that it doesn't break under pressure. It survives distortion. It outlasts fabrication. It sits beneath every lie like a heartbeat, waiting for the moment the noise dies down so it can be heard. They believed they were architects of perception, believed they could frame reality in ways that served their ego. But perception is fragile, and reality is relentless. You gave them space to destroy themselves. You didn't warn them, you didn't beg, you didn't defend, you just watched. Because when someone lies to bury the truth, they start decaying from the inside. They get sloppy. They forget their own version of events. They confuse their lines. And one day, their illusion shatters under its own weight. Psychologically, people who lie with frequency begin to live in narrative loops. They condition themselves to believe what they've repeated. But the mind always remembers. It stores the real version somewhere. And when they see you standing strong, when they hear your name spoken with respect again, their memory betrays them. It reminds them of what they did. It reminds them of who they tried to destroy. That cognitive dissonance, the war between the version they told and the version they know, begins to crush their own psyche. They feel your presence not just as survival, but as confirmation you are the truth they thought they could erase. You didn't die in the lie, you resurrected in the aftermath. And now people are noticing. They're remembering. They're reviewing the things they were told, the tone with which your name was spoken, the inconsistencies in the story. You're not even speaking on it, but it's unraveling all the same, because truth doesn't need a microphone. It echoes in the silence of everything that came before it. You don't have to prove anything. You never did. They gave themselves away trying to hide you. That's the irony. Their obsession with suppressing your voice only made people wonder what power you must have held. And now, they're starting to see it. They're starting to see you. They're nervous now. Not because you're speaking up, but because you haven't yet. Because they know when someone holds truth this sharp, they don't need to scream. They only need to choose the right moment. And they've seen what you've become since the fall. How calm you are. How certain. How unreachable. That's what terrifies them. You're not angry. You're aware. And awareness backed by truth? That's not a threat. That's an ending. Not just to the game, but to their control. To their story. To the web they spun while hoping you'd stay stuck inside it. Let them fear it. Let them try to control the fallout with more stories, more projection. It's too late. They can't stop a force they never understood. Because they never grasped that you weren't trying to ruin them. You were simply refusing to die in the version of you they invented. You rose. And now that you've found your footing, the truth has found you. In your eyes, in your choices, and in your calm refusal to engage in the games they still play. You didn't just survive the lie, you became the evidence. Now they watch you and wonder when it all changed. But the truth was never new, it just wasn't convenient. It didn't fit the version they needed people to believe. But time has a way of aging lies poorly, and the longer they kept pretending, the more brittle their stories became. Now you walk past them and say nothing, and the silence feels like judgment. You didn't lift a finger. You didn't raise your voice. But the look in your eye says, I remember everything. And that memory, it's louder than any scream could ever be. You didn't come back with revenge. You came back with vision, and that vision pierced every illusion they clung to. You don't need apologies. You don't want explanations, because the truth did what it was meant to do. It rose. It clawed its way to the surface. It ruined their performance. It rewrote the ending. And you didn't have to lift a sword. You just stood still and let the truth come home. And now that it has, they look at you and finally understand. The danger was never in what you might say. The danger was that you were always right. They try to look away now, but your existence demands recognition. It doesn't beg for it, it commands it. Not through force, not through fear, but through a calm certainty that wraps around your aura like armor. The kind of certainty that unnerves liars, because it doesn't flinch in the face of accusation. You wear the truth now, not as an argument, but as identity. It's in your posture, your stillness, your refusal to correct the record, that restraint burns them alive. Because when someone moves in silence, but still radiates authority, it forces everyone to reevaluate the noise, and suddenly their noise sounds like desperation, their denial sounds like confession, and your presence, unshaken and unbothered, becomes the very proof they tried to bury. They don't hate you because you're loud, they hate you because you didn't have to be. You let the lie exhaust itself, you let the mask slip without trying to rip it off. You knew that timing exposes what intention can't, so you waited, not in passivity, but in calculation. You rebuilt while they unraveled. You evolved while they improvised. You sat with the rage and turned it into precision. And now, you're untouchable. Not because you fought them, but because you transcended them. The lie they spun was too small to contain who you were becoming.